On today's Newsmakers, Robert Morris's victim speaks, Nigerian persecution and free speech fears. That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable news figures. On today's Newsmakers, we're welcoming Robert Morris's victim, Cindy Clemishire. She's joining us to share her harrowing story and what she faced. Let's welcome Cindy to the show. So last week was a big week in this case because he pleaded guilty. You were in the courtroom. Not only were you in the courtroom, you read a victim statement, you confronted him and faced him. What was that like for you?
Well, it was very emotional. It was emotional to be sitting next to my dad and holding his hand, knowing the immense feelings that were going through him. He loved Robert. We like my statement said, we were like family, and all of that being dredged back up, I know was extremely painful for him, and just the guilt that he's had to deal with, I know had to be painful. So there was a lot of pain involved, but there was also just an empowering feeling behind it as well, because we were finally being heard by the world and the law, and it felt like the timing was right.
Well, and, being in that courtroom, when you were speaking to him and at him, what did you sense was coming from him? Did you get a sense of any remorse, a sense of any reaction from him?
No, he never looked up. He was looking at the table. He was sitting at a table and he was looking directly down at the table. He looked down the whole time that my sister spoke. He only looked at his attorney and the judge and was jovial almost with them, but we never, ever looked up once, even though we were addressing him directly. And Debbie did look at me, and I spoke to her directly.
His wife.
Yes, his wife. And his kids were there, and their spouses. Never felt a sense of remorse. He had to stand up and read all 5 indictments and plead whatever he was going to plead, which was guilty to all 5. And they included details of what he did, which are public record. And he had the opportunity at that point to look over at my family, at me, at my father, whoever, and apologize, or say whatever he wanted to say. He would have been given that same opportunity to make a statement, and he chose not to.
So he did not speak to you guys in that courtroom at all. If he had spoken to you, and this is a hard question to ask, and we talked a little bit about it when we first spoke, if he had apologized to you and given you that, what would that have done for you? Would it have given you any peace? What would that have given you?
Well, I think that's a hard question to answer because it depends on if he was sincere, if it was genuine, how that came across. And of course, if it was genuine, it would mean something. What I realized when I left the courtroom was I didn't need that. I didn't need that to feel different. And I couldn't describe my feelings when that day. It took me about 24 hours to process what happened to me in that courtroom, but there was definitely a shift.
Well, and part of that shift, and I don't want to speak for you, but I know this story and we have spoken quite a bit about all of this. Your family trying to sound the alarm, warn people, talk to people over the years once you told your parents about it. And the reaction that you received, correct me if I'm wrong, was silence. Can you describe, and that's why when you say something shifted in that courtroom, I understand exactly why it would, because for the first time you were being heard. Right. Can you reflect on that a little?
Yes, I think when you tell so many people that have authority in that religious sector, whatever you want to call it, among that charismatic group, and some pretty high up people know, I mean, some of the highest up in that in that part of our religious world. And they just continue to sweep it under the rug. They say he's been restored. They don't ask about my restoration. They don't pursue helping me find restoration or my family. The frustration and the pain just continues to compound exponentially. And so it really just damages the faith in organized religion for me. And many, many people have said horrible things about my dad, judging him, why he didn't go to the police, where was her dad, did he, then calling me names saying, well, she probably was what Robert said because her dad didn't go to the police. So there's been a lot of backlash on that topic. And I would like to give a little bit of clarification on why he did not go to the police.
Yes.
My dad had recently found a woman. He was out early in the morning working because he was in the oil business, and they go out before the sun comes up to start checking their wells and things. And he found a woman that had been left in a ditch, and she had been raped. And he took her home, and my mom helped her clean up, and they called the county sheriff, and whoever came out actually blamed the woman because she had been somewhere drinking. And so I don't know whatever happened to her, and I don't know who all the people were involved, and I don't think my parents even knew her personally, but they were so afraid of that happening that because women got blamed, and I'm sure they still get blamed. Well, in my victim statement, I told Robert that not only did he steal my innocence and basically murdered the woman and I was supposed to grow into, Robert did not do anything but teach me that my body was not sacred.
Wow.
And that had a major impact on my adult life. And I not only didn't think it was sacred, but almost felt like it wasn't mine to protect. It was intended to please someone else only. So, I think that many times we're attracted to other people that are broken in similar ways. And you get together and you try and fix each other's brokenness or your own brokenness, and it just can create a lot more pain. Thankfully, I'm going to say a positive thing. I do have good relationships with my ex-husbands, and very thankful for the children that came from my marriages, and extended families that I do have. But yeah, it definitely changed what I know now, how I want to be treated now, and what I would teach my own daughters if I had any daughters.
I think that's incredible, and I appreciate you taking the time, and people will be praying for you as you continue to speak out, and we just appreciate you being with us today.
Well, I sure appreciate you too. Thank you so much.
Let's continue to pray for Cindy and everyone involved in this tragic story. We'll be right back with more Newsmakers in just a moment. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, Brad Brandon, CEO of Across Nigeria, shares his journey from pastor to missionary in Nigeria. He's on the ground helping the persecuted church in a powerful way. Let's welcome Brad to Newsmakers. Nigeria is a nation that we have talked about a lot here at CBN News, and it's important to continue to talk about because I think a lot of people, particularly in the Christian church in America, do not realize the extent of the persecution happening there in Nigeria. Before we get into some of those details, for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about Across Nigeria?
Yeah, Across Nigeria has basically two focuses. One is to help the persecuted church in northern Nigeria. And if you're not familiar with what's going on in northern Nigeria, it is right now the most dangerous place to be a Christian. So more Christians were killed in northern Nigeria than anywhere else in the world. In fact, not by slim margins either. Last year, 70% of all the Christians martyred in the entire world, 70% of them were killed in northern Nigeria. So the numbers are staggering. And already this year, there's been over 7,000 Christians that have been killed in northern Nigeria. So Across Nigeria works in those areas. I spend most of the year in northern Nigeria helping persecuted Christians. We have a refugee center. We help people restart their lives after losing family, losing everything because they became a Christian. The other side to our ministry is that we also reach Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So we do that through our schools. We have schools that cater to Fulani Muslims. Fulani Muslims are of the most illiterate children in the entire world. So we're trying to change that. We also help them with food and medical opportunities, things like that, anything we can do to show them the love of Christ. So those are the twofold focuses that we have here at Across Nigeria.
You know, as you're talking about the work you do, obviously this is dangerous work. I mean, you're in a part of the world, you mentioned this is the worst place to be a Christian in the world right now. And the fact that the vast majority of the killings and chaos targeted at Christians are happening there in Nigeria. What is it like for you to know that the work that you're doing, and we're going to get into the specifics of that even more, carries with it a real danger to you as well?
I'm so used to it at this point that it doesn't bother me probably as much as it once does, but we're very security conscious. I mean, we work in areas that are controlled by Boko Haram, areas that are controlled by ISWA, which is the Islamic State of West Africa. We are sometimes 12 hours into areas that are controlled by them, and there's really no help that we're going to be able to get if something happens. So we're always security conscious. But our goal, I look at it like the work we're doing is way more important than we are. It's way bigger than we are. And we stay focused on that, stay focused on our calling, and try not to think too much about the dangers that we're in. But we are in them all the time.
Okay, so this work, and for people to understand, I really want people to wrap their heads around this, because in America, we are so conditioned to have freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Of course, we can debate the confines of that, and people will have those discussions and debates. But the reality is what we're talking about in Nigeria is an otherworldly persecution that is so intense. If you make a decision for Christ, there's a target on your back immediately, I would assume, obviously, based on this. With so much of this is so dark and difficult and negative, what are you seeing, though, that gives you some hope?
Oh, that's a great question, because a lot of times people want to talk about all of the negative things that are happening, and there's plenty of those to discuss. And sometimes I feel like when we talk about that too much, we give the devil more platform than maybe we should. Amazing things are happening. We're seeing thousands of Muslims come to know Jesus Christ. We're seeing lives changed. I mean, literally transformed. And again, this is a part of the world where if you become a Christian, it's under Sharia law. And under Sharia law, there's a doctrine called Arim Asharif, which means honor killing. That means if you become a Christian, it is legal to kill you. Your family can kill you. They can hire somebody to kill you. That's like a foreign concept to a lot of us here in the West, but it's an everyday occurrence in northern Nigeria. We're seeing people put their faith in Christ despite all of the dangers and all of the controversies and the violence. Even though they're losing everything, the government can come in and seize their properties, take their children, freeze their bank accounts. They come to us with the clothes on their back, and when they do, they are invigorated. It's like watching a man who's been walking in the desert for a week with no water, and finally he gets a drink of water, and it just invigorates every part of their lives, and it's exciting to see that. And we're seeing that happen from the east to the west in northern Nigeria. God is at work in the hearts of the Muslim community, not just in northern Nigeria, but all around the world.
Well, we hear stories of people having dreams, of Muslims having dreams of Jesus. We hear these radical, amazing. Do you encounter those kinds of stories there, the supernatural ones?
Yeah, we have many times encountered, in fact, what you just mentioned, dreams. That seems to be a pretty pervasive thing that's happening right now throughout the Muslim world. We've had people have a series of dreams where God revealed to them who Jesus Christ was. And even some, God is asking them questions about Allah and the Quran, questions they can't answer, and then revealing to them that Jesus Christ is the answer to all of those questions. And so a lot of times they'll come to us already knowing the full gospel, even though they didn't hear it growing up. They're not in a part of the world where it's talked about, but they'll know the entire story, death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ before we even present to them the gospel of Jesus Christ. So that is absolutely happening.
Wow. We appreciate you taking the time, joining us, and taking us through these stories. We'd love to have you back.
Hey, thanks, Billy. I really appreciate it.
Be praying for Brad and Across Nigeria. For more on his organization, you can go to acrossnigeria.org. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, Alliance Defending Freedom Senior Counsel Ryan Bangert joins us to break down some of his biggest free speech concerns. Let's welcome them here to Newsmakers. So Meta, Facebook, social media, and censorship. This has been a huge topic. Obviously, Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, making this decision, announcing that they were going to suddenly stop censorship, and in that announcement, really admitting to censoring, which I think is probably the most remarkable part of that. When you look at this from a legal perspective and you see that response, what's your take on it?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question and thanks for having me on. And I want to take you back to the Biden administration at the height of the COVID pandemic. The White House begins privately leaning on social media companies, including Meta, to take down messaging that contradicts the White House's preferred line on COVID, including masks, including vaccinations, including stay-at-home orders. And there was a concerted campaign by individuals within the White House to force off of social media any messages, any voices that contradicted their party line. So we have seen an effort by the left to engage in overt censorship of what they call disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation for years now. Look at what the Treasury Department did, asking financial institutions to track political enemies of the White House. These were incredibly gross abuses of government power. And now that that thumb has been lifted off the scales, that boot has been lifted off the throat of some of these companies, I think what you're seeing is an opportunity for them to come around and recognize that what was happening for the past 4 years was completely at odds with the core values of the First Amendment that protects freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience. We've all been talking about this for years now. Social media really is the new public square. And if it's going to be the new public square, it needs to be a place where free discourse can happen. And I think Mark Zuckerberg gets that. And this announcement that he made shortly after Trump's election validates that. It validates that, I think, in spades.
Yeah, it's interesting, why not realize it earlier and sooner? Why not realize it when it was going on, when people were being punished over asking simple questions on social? That part of it is a little troubling.
Hey, better late than never,
okay,
right?
Fair.
And hey, at ADF, we filed amicus briefs in those cases, pushing back on that effort to engage in censorship. But we still think, and I think this is really a thread that your listeners need to recognize, as global censorship is still a real and in some places growing problem around the globe. It's not going to be ended or defeated simply by a few executive orders. Take the example of Adam Smith Connor over in the UK, an ADF client who was prosecuted by law enforcement in the UK simply for praying silently on a sidewalk outside an abortion clinic in violation of a buffer zone law. He didn't say a word. He stood and prayed silently in his own mind outside an abortion clinic where years before he and his girlfriend had aborted their unborn son. And he was approached by law enforcement, questioned about what he was doing. When he finally copped to saying a prayer inside his mind, a silent prayer in his own mind, he was prosecuted for that. J.D. Vance talked about this in his speech in Munich just a few days ago. And I'm very encouraged by the fact that our vice president is now calling out countries like the UK for violating civil rights in the way that they violated our client Adam Smith Connor's rights. But I'm also trepidatious and I think a little bit nervous the fact that this is still going on in countries like the UK, a country where many of our freedom, we inherited many of our freedoms and constitutional liberties from their constitution. So don't say it can't happen here. And even though we're seeing a new wind blowing here in the US, there's always that risk things could revert back, so we've got to be vigilant.
You know, outside of the cases that we've discussed, what is a case you really believe right now what people need to be keeping their eyes on?
Well, I'm really excited about a case that we're going to be arguing at the U.S. Supreme Court in April. It's called Drummond. It's a case arising from Oklahoma. Oklahoma has a charter school system, and a Roman Catholic charter school, a Roman Catholic school, applied for entrance to the charter school program and was granted that by the charter school board. And they were very quickly sued on grounds that they couldn't be part of the charter school program in Oklahoma. Why? Because they're religious. And for no other reason, just because they're religious. And unbelievably, that lawsuit succeeded. The Oklahoma Supreme Court upheld the exclusion of this Catholic charter school from Oklahoma's charter school program simply on grounds that it's a religious charter school. So the U.S. Supreme Court granted review in that case, and ADF will be arguing that case in April before the U.S. Supreme Court. And I think it's a very important case because we've seen school choice become an explosive movement all across the country. And if Christian schools, if schools that have a faith basis, like this Roman Catholic charter school in Oklahoma, can access that school choice, that's going to be a game changer.
Very good. That's an important case, and we appreciate you breaking it all down today and joining us today.
My pleasure. Happy to do it anytime.
Thank you.
You bet.
Let's continue to pray for First Amendment victories. I said this last week. I'll say it again. We want to see those continue here in America. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you'll find the full interviews you saw on today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our new documentary investigating the supernatural miracles. We traveled all over America documenting some of the most incredible miracle claims. You can watch that at cbn.com/supernatural. As for this show, we'll see you next